I was pregnant when my husband cheated with my sister, so I divorced him and exposed them both. It was a betrayal so devastating that it felt like my entire world had been ripped apart. To make matters worse, the timing of their deceit couldn't have been more heartless. While I was in the hospital, recovering from the grueling process of bringing our child into the world, they flaunted their betrayal in the most brazen way imaginable. They sent me a photo of themselves together, smiling as though they hadn't just destroyed my life. It was a cruel reminder that the two people I trusted most had shattered that trust in the cruelest way possible. Now karma seems to have turned on them. My sister, Jessica, is pregnant, abandoned by the very man she betrayed me for, and desperately seeking forgiveness. But forgiveness? That's something I'm not sure I'll ever be able to give. To understand how this all came to pass, you need to know about Jessica and the long, painful history we share. Jessica, 34, and I, 33, have always had a difficult relationship, to put it mildly. Growing up, Jessica was the embodiment of sibling rivalry. She couldn't stand the idea of me succeeding or being happy unless she had beaten me to it or done it better. If I excelled at something, she had to prove she could do it too, and better. If I had a friend, she tried to make them her friend instead. It was an endless, exhausting cycle of competition that seemed to consume her. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder if her constant need to one-up me came from some deep-seated insecurity. But at the time, it just felt like relentless hostility. Jessica's jealousy wasn't subtle. She always made it clear that she saw me as a rival rather than a sister. From a young age, she tried to outdo me in every way. If I joined a club or sport, Jessica would suddenly decide she needed to join too, even if she had no interest in it before. I had a deep passion for a particular sport that I had practiced since childhood. It wasn't just a hobby for me. It was a part of who I was. I spent countless hours perfecting my skills, earning awards, and building a reputation. Then, when I was 16, Jessica decided she wanted to compete in the same sport. She wasn't interested in the work or dedication it required. She just wanted to win. Our parents, perhaps trying to be fair, allowed her to join, even though it was clear she lacked the skills or the drive. Jessica spent more time mocking me during practices than actually improving her own abilities. When the day of the competition came, it was clear to everyone that she wasn't prepared. Despite her lack of skill, Jessica fully expected to win and was furious when I took first place. Her tantrum at the award ceremony was mortifying for our parents, who had to drag her out of the venue while she screamed and cried. Later that evening, in a fit of rage, Jessica broke my award. It was a cruel and thoughtless act, destroying something I had worked so hard for. Our parents reprimanded her and sent her to therapy, hoping it would help her manage her jealousy. But Jessica wasn't interested in changing. As we got older, her behavior only worsened. She found new ways to undermine me, particularly by attacking my appearance. Every morning before school, she would criticize my clothes or my hair, claiming I embarrassed her. Jessica was always bold and flashy in her style. Short skirts, crop tops, and heavy makeup, while I preferred a more casual, comfortable look. I wasn't unattractive, and I knew it, but her constant jabs wore on me. It wasn't just at home either. At school, Jessica thrived in the popular crowd, using her social standing to make me feel small. She told people I couldn't possibly be her real sister and started rumors that I was adopted. In my junior year of high school, I found a creative outlet in writing. I started a blog on WordPress, pouring my heart into my posts. It wasn't long before I gained a following. By the time I graduated, I had over 2,500 subscribers, and local businesses were reaching out to collaborate. I started earning money, which I saved for college. My parents were proud of me, but Jessica saw my success as yet another challenge. She demanded I share my earnings with her, claiming it was unfair that I had an income while she didn't. I refused, encouraging her to find her own passion. In typical Jessica fashion, she tried to copy me, starting her own blog and insisting it would surpass mine. But when her blog failed to gain traction, her frustration turned to bitterness. She accused me of sabotaging her by not promoting her posts on my platform, conveniently ignoring the fact that she had mocked my writing from the start. Eventually, She gave up, but not before leaving behind a trail of insults and resentment. College brought a temporary reprieve from Jessica's constant antagonism. I was accepted into an Ivy League school, much to her dismay. She had applied to the same schools but was rejected, which only fueled her jealousy. When I shared the news of my acceptance, Jessica accused me of faking it, claiming she deserved to get in more than I did. Our parents, tired of her antics, tried to reason with her, but it was no use. Jessica stormed out, leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. College was transformative for me. Away from Jessica's shadow, I thrived. I discovered new passions, made lifelong friends, and started building the life I'd always dreamed of. For the first time, I felt free to be myself without worrying about her judgment or competition. But as I built my life, Jessica seemed determined to tear it down. When she couldn't compete with me academically, she turned her focus to my personal life, meddling in my friendships and relationships. When I met Jake, my future husband, I thought things might finally improve. I thought maybe Jessica would back off, especially when she found her own relationship. But I was wrong. Jessica's jealousy and need for attention never wavered. Little did I know, she was already setting the stage for the ultimate betrayal, one that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about family. When Jake and I decided to move in together, Jessica's usual behavior surfaced through her passive-aggressive comments. She often made snide remarks about our relationship, almost as if she was searching for ways to belittle it. However, her attitude shifted when she met Mark. He seemed to be everything she wanted, and for the first time in years, her sharp comments toward me began to fade. I suspected this change was driven by her deep desire to be the first in our family to get married and start a family. While it seemed trivial to me, as I wasn't in any rush for those milestones, it clearly mattered a great deal to her. During the Christmas holidays, Jessica announced her engagement and her plans to marry in 2024. I was genuinely happy for her. I congratulated her warmly, and for the first time in what felt like years, she hugged me. It was a moment that gave me hope that perhaps we could mend the fractured relationship we had endured for so long. It felt like a breakthrough, a chance to set aside the rivalry and jealousy that had defined so much of our lives. However, life took an unexpected turn in the months that followed. Jake's younger brother, Eric, called with devastating news. He had been diagnosed with a very aggressive illness. Eric was only 25, and the diagnosis hit the family like a freight train. Jake, who was incredibly close to his brother, was heartbroken. Having already lost their father at a young age, the brothers shared a bond forged through shared grief and resilience. Without hesitation, we rushed to be by Eric's side to offer whatever support we could during such a difficult time. One evening, while we were staying with Jake's family, Jake surprised me with a proposal. It wasn't something I had been expecting, given the circumstances, but he explained his reasoning with a mix of vulnerability and love. He wanted Eric to be part of our wedding, to share in our happiness while he still could. Jake said he had always dreamed of marrying me, and this seemed like the perfect moment to honor that dream while bringing some light to Eric's life. Touched by his heartfelt words, I said yes. Given the situation, Jake and I agreed that we didn't want a grand or extravagant wedding. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close family and friends, focusing on the love and joy that the day would bring rather than on pomp and spectacle. When we shared the news with Eric and the rest of Jake's family, the response was overwhelming. Eric cried tears of joy, and the happiness on his face confirmed that we had made the right decision. In the midst of all the pain and uncertainty, our engagement was a beacon of hope. As excited as I was, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety about how Jessica would react. I didn't want her to misunderstand our intentions or feel that I was trying to overshadow her upcoming wedding. Hoping to avoid any unnecessary conflict, I called her before telling the rest of my family. I carefully explained the situation, emphasizing that our small ceremony would in no way detract from her grand wedding plans the following year. I also invited her to join us, knowing how much it would mean to me to have her there on such a special day. To my dismay, Jessica's response was anything but supportive. She immediately accused me of using Eric's illness as an excuse to rush into marriage and claimed I was only doing it to beat her to the altar. Her words stung deeply, especially when she angrily declared that this was why she had always resented me, even as a child. Her bitterness and jealousy resurfaced with full force, and I found myself in tears. It was heartbreaking that, even in such a difficult time, she couldn't see beyond her insecurities and appreciate the love and meaning behind our decision. I tried to explain that I had called her first because I wanted her to feel included, but she wasn't interested in hearing me out. Instead, she shouted that I was just trying to steal her spotlight and hung up on me. It was a painful reminder that, no matter how much I hoped for a better relationship with Jessica, her competitive nature and resentment always seemed to win out. Despite her reaction, I knew we couldn't let her negativity overshadow what should have been a joyful and meaningful moment in our lives. Jake's family rallied around us, and Eric's enthusiasm for the wedding plans kept our spirits high. We chose a date that worked for everyone and focused on the love and support we had from those who truly cared. While I still wished for Jessica's approval and presence, I accepted that her insecurities might never allow her to share in our happiness. Jake and I grew even closer during the time leading up to our wedding, bonded by our shared goal of bringing joy to Eric and creating memories that would last forever. While Jessica's reaction weighed heavily on me, I had to focus on those who truly supported us. My parents were incredibly understanding and excited about the wedding, offering their full support and helping with the preparations. Their enthusiasm reminded me of the love and strength of family, providing a much-needed boost to my spirits. The day of our wedding was everything Jake and I had hoped for, simple, intimate, and filled with love. We exchanged vows in a heartfelt ceremony, surrounded by our closest family and friends. Eric stood proudly by Jake's side as his best man, his smile radiating joy despite the difficult circumstances. The intimate setting allowed us to focus on what truly mattered, our love for each other and the unyielding support of those who cared about us. After the ceremony, we celebrated with laughter, shared stories, and heartfelt moments. It was a day that reminded us all of the power of love and resilience, even in the face of life's challenges. For me, the wedding was a reaffirmation that I was on the right path, choosing happiness and surrounding myself with those who uplifted me. But Jessica's animosity loomed like a dark cloud. Just before the wedding, she called me a jealous snob and declared she would never attend. Her rage escalated to the point where she even screamed that she wished Jake had died instead of Eric, believing it would have prevented us from getting married. Her words left me shattered and questioning everything. Seeking comfort, I turned to my parents, who reassured me I had done nothing wrong. They expressed their happiness for both of their daughters and promised they would be there for my wedding, regardless of Jessica's behavior. Their unwavering support gave me the strength to move forward. The wedding was a beautiful success, but the aftermath brought more drama. When I posted some of our wedding photos on social media, I received a call from Jessica. Hoping she might extend an olive branch, I answered, only to be bombarded with demands to delete the photos. She didn't want our friends and family to know I had married before her and insisted I could only share my pictures after her wedding. Her request was absurd, and I stood my ground, making it clear I was done trying to appease her unreasonable demands. Furious, she called me insufferable and uninvited me from her wedding. Calmly, I told her I was fine with her decision and asked her to leave me alone. Despite the tension with Jessica, Jake and I found joy in our marriage. Even with his demanding job, Jake made our relationship a priority, remaining a loving and attentive partner. A few months later, Jessica married Mark as planned. Although I didn't attend due to being uninvited, I sent her a large bouquet of flowers and a congratulatory note. I saw her wedding photos and felt genuinely happy for her, hoping this would be a turning point for her happiness. However, it wasn't long before more turmoil surfaced. Just weeks after their marriage, I received a call from my mother with troubling news. Jessica had been unfaithful to Mark with a coworker. The scandal was explosive, and the blame fell squarely on Jessica. She attempted to justify her actions by claiming she wanted an open marriage, but Mark had refused. Unable to stay with her after the betrayal, Mark applied for an annulment. It was heartbreaking to see Mark, who had seemed deeply in love with Jessica, blindsided by her actions. Amid the fallout from Jessica's scandal, another devastating blow struck our family. Eric passed away. Jake and I rushed to be with his family for the funeral. Jake was inconsolable, completely shattered by the loss of his brother. Something inside him broke that day, and he was never the same again. His grief consumed him, and the man I had married seemed to disappear. He became distant, withdrawn, and irritable, quick to anger over the smallest things. His once loving nature was replaced by bitterness and apathy. I encouraged Jake to seek grief counseling, but his behavior only worsened. He stopped going to work, leading to his eventual termination. Days turned into weeks, and he spent most of his time in pajamas playing video games or watching sports. Meanwhile, I took on the role of sole breadwinner, working grueling 12-hour shifts as a paramedic to keep us afloat. I tried everything to reach him. Gentle conversations, tough love, counseling sessions, but nothing seemed to penetrate the wall he had built around himself. As time went on, I began to notice peculiar behaviors in Jake, ones I couldn't ignore. When Jake started hiding his phone from me, a behavior he'd never exhibited before, it set off alarms. His newfound secrecy made me increasingly suspicious. He would frequently ask about my work schedule, and when he did come home, it was always the same pattern, finding excuses to stay out late, barely engaging with me, and showing no interest in my day. His evenings were often spent on spending sprees, indulging in lavish dinners, and purchasing flashy gadgets for himself. Amid this growing distance, I discovered I was 3 months pregnant. My missed periods, which I had attributed to work stress, turned out to be something much more significant. When I finally told Jake, his reaction was cold and detached. I confronted him directly, telling him that if he didn't want to be a father, he was free to leave. He assured me he was happy about the baby, but his tone lacked sincerity, and I couldn't shake the feeling that his heart wasn't in it. The pregnancy itself was a relentless ordeal. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum, a condition that left me severely ill and bedridden for months. Unable to work or maintain my usual routine, I had to stop seeing friends and struggled just to get through each day. My parents stepped in to help with the household, as I was too unwell to manage even basic tasks. Jake found a new job to support us financially, but the tension between us only grew. I reassured him that once the baby was born, I would return to work, but he grew increasingly frustrated. He began accusing me of being lazy and dramatic, completely dismissing the constant pain and exhaustion I was enduring. Then came the day my water broke. In a panic, I called Jake 12 times, but he didn't answer. Desperate, I sent him a text explaining that I was about to give birth and needed him to meet me at the hospital. My parents rushed me there, and as I lay in the hospital bed, writhing in pain, my phone buzzed with a notification. My mother, holding my hand to comfort me, picked up the phone, thinking it might be Jake. Her face turned pale as she read the message, her expression a mixture of heartbreak and anger. I demanded to see it, and reluctantly, she handed me the phone. What I saw shattered what little strength I had left. A photo of Jessica and Jake lying in bed together. Jessica had sent it, accompanied by a cruel message. "Good luck being a single mom because I've taken your husband." I was stunned and furious. In the midst of labor, I called Jake. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding completely unbothered. I screamed at him, demanding to know what he was doing with my sister. He admitted, in the coldest tone, that he had fallen in love with Jessica. He claimed that she had supported him through the difficult times following his brother's death, and their relationship had evolved into an affair over several months. He even confessed that he had intended to keep it a secret until after I gave birth, but Jessica didn't want to wait any longer. Jake's apologies started pouring out, but I cut him off. I didn't care about his excuses. Through tears and rage, I told him I would see him in court. His betrayal with Jessica, my own sister, was unforgivable. Even though my heart was shattered, I refused to let this destroy me. I cried throughout my labor, but despite everything, My daughter, Emma, was born healthy. My father, holding Emma for the first time, looked at her with a mix of sorrow and love that broke my heart all over again. In the days that followed, my world felt like it had been turned upside down. The betrayal weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had to stay strong for Emma. My parents were my unwavering support system, helping me navigate the aftermath of this nightmare. I began preparing for the inevitable legal battle with Jake. I documented everything, gathered evidence, and sought legal advice. The pain of what he and Jessica had done cut deep, but Emma gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded that I had a future to build, a life where she would be loved and cherished, free from the shadows of deceit. Determined to protect Emma and rebuild my life, I made sure everyone in our family and circle of friends knew the truth about what Jessica and Jake had done. I showed them the incriminating photo and message Jessica had sent. My parents were livid. They immediately called Jessica, telling her that she was no longer part of the family. They declared her actions unforgivable and made it clear she should never contact them again. My father went so far as to say she was cut out of their lives and their will. Jessica, in a weak attempt to justify herself, claimed she and Jake were in love. But my father shut her down, refusing to listen to her excuses. We blocked her on all our phones and social media, and many of our relatives, upon hearing the full story, sent her harsh messages. I didn't stop them. Her betrayal deserved to be addressed. Jake's mother was equally heartbroken when I told her what had happened. She tried to talk sense into her son, but it was too late. I was resolute in my decision to end our marriage. Nothing he or anyone else could say would change my mind. I packed up my belongings, moved back in with my parents, and began the process of starting over. Jake tried to approach me, claiming he had realized his mistake after speaking with his mother. But I refused to even look at him. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I refused to let Jake see our daughter, Emma, until the court intervened and granted him supervised visitation rights. I couldn't trust him, not after the betrayal he and Jessica had inflicted on me during such a vulnerable time in my life. What they had done was not just cruel, it was utterly deranged, and I needed to protect Emma from the toxic influence they represented. I moved back in with my parents, who welcomed Emma and me with open arms, offering a safe haven when my world had fallen apart. Their unwavering support gave me the strength to focus on the daunting task of rebuilding my life. My first priority was to hire a reputable lawyer and file for divorce. During the proceedings, Jake tried every tactic to avoid paying alimony, but the evidence of his infidelity, paired with the judge's clear understanding of the situation, left him no room to escape his responsibilities. The court held him accountable, awarding me primary custody of Emma and granting Jake only supervised visits. My lawyer presented compelling evidence of his aggressive outbursts and depressive episodes, which further solidified the court's decision to restrict his access to our daughter. 8 months have passed since my divorce from Jake, and while he has remained consistent with child support payments, his attempts to rebuild any semblance of a relationship with Emma have been half-hearted at best. He sends the occasional apology, but I've made it clear that his words mean nothing to me now. My focus is solely on providing a loving and stable environment for Emma. Returning to work as a paramedic, I relied on my mother to babysit Emma during the day. In the evenings, I would take over, cherishing every moment I spent with my daughter. She became my anchor, a source of strength and hope that carried me through the darkest of days. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I was shocked to hear Jessica's voice. She had been blocked from my contacts for months, but she had managed to call me using a friend's phone. Her voice was filled with desperation as she begged me not to hang up. She claimed she had been trying to reach me for a long time, but I interrupted her, making it clear that I had nothing to say to her. I demanded she stop contacting me and leave me alone. But before I could end the call, Jessica dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant, and Emma was going to have a brother. Waves of shock, disbelief, and anger swept over me as I demanded an explanation. Through sobs, Jessica confessed that Jake was the father. She pleaded for forgiveness, insisting that for the sake of her unborn child, we should reconcile and try to rebuild our relationship. Her words made me laugh bitterly. The audacity of her plea, after all she had done, was almost comical. I reminded her coldly of the choice she had made to sleep with my husband while I was carrying his child. She tried to justify her actions, claiming she had been caught up in emotions and had never intended for things to spiral out of control. But her excuses meant nothing to me. I told her plainly that I didn't care if she was pregnant. I wanted nothing to do with her or her child. Jessica's desperation turned to anger. She began to scream, accusing me of turning our family against her and cutting her off from the life she once had. She lamented that Jake was pressuring her to have an abortion and had completely abandoned her, leaving her isolated and desperate. Her words didn't stir sympathy in me. Instead, they felt like poetic justice. She had betrayed me in the most personal and devastating way, and now she was reaping the consequences of her actions. Before hanging up, I told her that her choices had led her to this point, and that she had no one to blame but herself. In the days that followed, I confided in my close friends about Jessica's call. Reactions were mixed. Some supported my decision to cut her off entirely, while others suggested I might consider forgiveness for the sake of her child. But I remained resolute. Forgiving Jessica would not erase the pain she had caused, nor would it undo the irreparable damage to our relationship. Eventually, I updated my parents about Jessica's pregnancy. Their reactions mirrored my own initial shock and disbelief. My mother wept openly, heartbroken over how far Jessica had strayed from the person she had hoped she would become. My father, on the other hand, was livid. He eventually called Jake to confront him directly, demanding an explanation. Jake admitted that after our divorce, Jessica had quickly lost interest in him and had sought validation from other men. When she later told him about the pregnancy, he suggested she reconsider keeping the baby. Jessica, however, insisted on becoming a mother, claiming she wanted to emulate me. Jake agreed to pay child support, but made it clear he wanted no relationship with Jessica or the child. This revelation solidified what we all suspected. Jessica's actions were driven by her relentless need to compete with me, even at the cost of her own happiness. My parents were devastated by the realization and made it clear they wanted nothing to do with Jessica, though I assured them they were free to maintain a relationship with her if they chose. 6 months later, Emma and I moved into our own home, a cozy, modest space that felt like a fresh start. Living independently has been both challenging and rewarding. While the demands of single parenthood can be overwhelming, watching Emma grow and thrive fills me with a joy I never imagined possible. My parents remain a steadfast source of support, visiting regularly to help and shower Emma with love. Jessica recently gave birth to her son, but only my mother visited her in the hospital. My father refused, unable to forgive her for the pain she had caused. During her visit, my mother made it clear that the only reason she came was for the sake of the baby, not for Jessica. Jessica pleaded for forgiveness, but my mother stood firm, telling her that her betrayal had caused irreparable damage to our family. As for Jake, he continues to pay child support for both Emma and Jessica's child, but remains largely uninvolved in either of their lives. The shame of his actions seems to weigh heavily on him, though I feel no pity. Therapy has been a lifeline for me, helping me process the betrayal and slowly rebuild my sense of self. Through it all, Emma has been my beacon of hope, a reminder of the strength and resilience I didn't know I possessed. Despite the heartache and challenges, I am determined to create a life filled with love and stability for Emma. Moving forward, I am focused on the future, knowing that the toxic ties of the past no longer have a hold on me. With the support of my parents and the joy Emma brings to my life, I am confident that brighter days lie ahead.